Hello and welcome to the Mike's DIY Tips channel on YouTube. I'm Mike, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make this simple drop down clothes airer. I made this one very wet afternoon when my wife was desperately trying to get the washing dry. Simple construction, it's just an all timber frame, square butt joints with 2 screws in each, clothesline running through, hinges direct to the wall, lightweight suspension chain fixed to a screw eye at the top and a single screw at the bottom. To hold it up when not in use, a swivel catch like that. It's a one-hand operation. So here's a diagram of the frame that we're going to make. I've shown the dimensions that I use, but you would have to decide your own dimensions to suit what material you've got available and the fitting space that you've got. The square cut butt joints, I've labelled each joint A, B, C, D, E, F, so you need to label each half of the joint so that you don't try and fit this piece in that position, for example, and then find the screw holes don't line up. We're using 2 screws per joint. The hinges, position them 30 centimetres in from the end. We've also got to drill holes in the cross members to pass the clothesline through, so 3 holes in each. My frame was constructed of hardwood using material from an old fitted wardrobe, so I used the material I got, but it works very well. So the long pieces were 34 by 20, so it was 34 deep. And the cross pieces were 44 by 34 millimeters, and that's to make the catch block. Now if you decide to buy softwood, make the long piece a little bit deeper, so a little bit deeper than that to resist sagging. When you buy your softwood, do your very best to choose the pieces you buy, looking out for large knots, which you don't want, and you certainly don't want sticky knots where the resin is already oozing out. You might be lucky to get softwood with more or less no knots. It's worth paying a little bit more money for that. If you have got to cut some of your timber to length, you need to put a pencil line there and down the edge there. But if you have got the luxury of a workbench and a bench hook, here's an alternative way of doing it. Here's my workbench and bench hook. That's a bench hook, and it normally goes on your workbench like that. This piece of wood stops it shooting that way, and you saw that way. But for the camera, I'm doing it this way so that you can see what I'm doing. It's a much nicer working height for control. The final and best option for cutting the wood nice and square is to use a miter saw, and although it's called a miter saw, there is a setting where you can cut at 90 degrees. And that gives you a nice square cut. The only other better option to that would be to use an electric chop saw. Now let's assume that you've got all of your timber cut to length, and the next job is to take off the sharpness of the edges. So if you've got a rough file, you can go like this, going across the grain because it takes the material off quicker, like that. Each corner. If you haven't got a file, you can use rough sandpaper. And don't forget to do the ends. If you've got the luxury of a plane, this is quicker. And once you've taken the main part off, you can finish off with fine sandpaper. Now that we've got all of our timber pieces ready, we can lay them out on the floor. And here I'm demonstrating joint D, which is that one. I've already marked a line there representing the thickness of that member, which I've extended down there. So that tells us the space we've got to drill the holes. So I've marked the holes there for the screws, and notice they're in a diagonal pattern. And also notice I've marked quite clearly that this is joint D. Because this is 20mm thick, I'm going to use a 50mm screw, which gives me plenty of length into this cross member. If you're using a thicker member for the long rail, then you need a longer screw. So you need a screw long enough to give you at least 25mm into the cross member. And because it's a 4mm diameter screw, I'm going to drill a 4.5mm clearance hole in this long rail here. The important thing now is to drill those holes perpendicular to the face of the timber. I've got a piece of wood here and a piece of wood the other end, spacing this off the floor so that when my drill pops through, it won't hit the floor and damage the drill. So I'm nice and steady, I'm checking, moving my head around to check that I'm drilling nice and vertically. Same with the other hole. Moving my head around to the side and in front of the drill. So then we've got to use these holes to mark the end here where we want the pilot holes. So because it's only a pilot hole, we want the screw to bite into the wood, so the pilot hole is going to be less than 4mm. This is where you'd normally need a bit of help. You'd need somebody to hold that in place and not let it move. But I'm improvising on my own, so I've got my heavy toolbox to press this against, and I'm pushing on here. Put the two screws in the hole. And when I'm satisfied that this is all nicely lined up, hit the two screws just enough to mark the end of the cross piece. And now to drill the pilot holes. Because it's a 4mm screw, I need a hole less than that diameter, so I'm going to use a 3mm diameter, and I need to hold this steady because I need to drill into that vertically straight down. I don't want to go off at an angle, so I've got to keep my eye on the drill all the time. When you've gone all around the frame drilling the clearance holes in the long members, then you need to go back to the same holes, and on the outside of the frame just countersink the holes. Let's talk about hinges. Imagine that that rail is the back rail and needs two hinges fixed on. These hinges are spaced 30 centimetres from the end. I suggest these 75mm hinges because they look right on the rail. Decide where you're going to put the hinge, mark with a pencil, drill the holes and screw the hinges on. It doesn't matter if the hinge overhangs at the back. What you don't really want is any overhang at the front here where it's got sharp corners. Next I want to demonstrate marking the wall for where the hinges go. So we've already fixed the hinges onto the long member at the back of the frame. In my case the rail or the frame is 4 feet from the ground. Now the other thing to show you is that when you're struggling on your own with no help, if you tape the spirit level onto the piece of wood, you haven't got to worry about that falling on the floor. So with the spirit level roughly correct, mark your holes on the wall and then don't worry about the other end, drill these first. Drill these holes first and put a wall plug in, then just fit one of the screws. Don't worry about the wood being level, let's just get the screw into the wall. So now that we've got one screw in, we can worry about the other end. When the spirit level is correct, so in other words the piece of wood is level, mark your other screw holes here, then drill them and put the wall plugs in. So we've got a screw in now to hold the rail in place. When we've done this, we need to take the rail off again to go back on the floor and assemble the whole frame. We're nearly ready to screw the whole frame together. There's one more thing you've got to do, and that is mark out and drill these holes for the clothesline to thread through. So the hole size needs to be just a little bit bigger than the thickness of the line so that it will pull through quite easily. When you drill the holes, just use your countersink bit and countersunk each end of each hole to tidy it up, especially here where the line's got to go around a corner. So once the frame is all assembled, we can fix it to the wall. So I've already put one screw in that hinge there, so now I'm going to get one in here. And then we can put all the rest of the screws in to complete the fixing. You've got to be careful though, because there's nothing supporting this edge. So I've got to be careful not to let it drop. So that was the last wall fixing screw. Now we need to deal with the support chains at each end to make it safe. So very gently I can let it hang like that. The hinges and screws are strong enough to hold it as long as we don't lean on it. Up here, as you can see, I've already fixed the screw eye. So that's one hole in the wall with a wall plug and then screw it right in. If you have any difficulty fixing a screw eye like that, you can use a screwdriver as a lever to wind it round. And the chain I used is like this, a very simple lightweight link chain, but it's perfectly strong enough. I've opened out the end like that to be a little bit bigger so that it will thread onto here. I've cut a little bit of the eye away, as I'll show you on a photograph now. so that this can hang on it or be taken off again, but the gap is too small for the chain to jump off by accident. Finally, you need to decide where you're going to put the screw here to suit the chain that you've got. So spirit level on there and you'll soon mark the spot and you can fix the chain. I'm using a simple screw like that, threaded through the chain. And the same at the other end. But leave the chain a bit loose to swivel on the screw. Now we need to look at the latching device to hold it up when not in use. For the latch, I've got 4 ideas for you. The first one is the method I've got here, which is a shaped latch made out of a solid block of wood and with one screw, but the screw loose enough to let it swivel freely like that, because then the frame can be operated with one hand like that. Alternatively, you could use something like this. This is a solid block fixed direct to the wall, and this is a loose flap on the front with a single screw. But I'll just take this off because I want to show you a couple of fixing options for the block behind. When you come to fix a thick block of wood like this to any surface, you have the choice of doing it 2 ways. Either with a long screw, which goes all the way through the block and would be countersunk in the face there, and there's the screw coming out, or use a shorter screw, but to enable you to do that you have to drill a large hole so far into the wooden blocks so that the short screw then has enough thread sticking out at the back to go into the wall. So this hole here has to be big enough to take the head of the screw. A word of warning: when you're drilling a big hole and continuing with a smaller hole, always drill the big hole first to the depth required, then carry on with the smaller drill all the way through to the back for the screw. If you try to do it the other way by drilling the small hole all the way through first and then enlarge that small hole with the big drill, what can happen very often is that the bigger drill starts to bite and suddenly it goes all the way through to the back before you can stop it. The third option is not to have a latch at all, but to arrange the hinging so that the whole frame hinges right down. The last option is to use a simple loop of cord around the frame like that, put a hook in the wall and loop the cord over the hook. But you need enough length on the cord to loop over the hook, in which case the frame is always going to lean out from the wall like that. It won't lie snugly against the wall as with the wooden latch that we had. So there you are, that's how to make a drop-down clothes airer. Thank you for watching. I hope you found some useful tips in that video, even if you decide not to make the clothes airer frame itself. We've looked at sawing wood, drilling wood, screwing into wood and fixing into walls. If you would like to watch my videos on those subjects, then the icons are coming up on screen now. Just click an icon to watch the video. And thanks again for watching.